Fuji X100V has quickly become one of my favorite cameras to shoot with. It's small, which makes it super portable. It has a fixed lens, which means that I don't need to decide what lens to take with me when I'm out shooting, and the photos that come out of it are incredible. Using this camera has put the fun back into photography and reminds me why I started taking photos in the first place. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to program Fuji recipes into your Fuji camera. I'm going to be using the Fuji X100V because that's the camera that I own, but the majority of the information that I share should work on almost all of the new Fuji cameras that have been put out. To do that, we're going to need a film recipe that we can follow to program into our cameras. So there's plenty of blogs, forums, and social media accounts that share recipes across the internet. Personally, I like to use one of my favorites, which is Fuji X Weekly. Fuji X Weekly has a website as well as an app. I tend to use the app because I can use it on my phone anywhere, and I think it's a little easier to navigate. When we open the app, we're greeted with dozens of film recipes that we can use on our Fuji. I recommend taking some time to scroll around here, get familiar with the app. There's plenty of recipes here that are going to look awesome on your camera. At the top of each recipe, there's photo examples of what your images are going to look like if you program these settings into your camera. Now let's say you're having a difficult time trying to decide what recipe you want to use on your camera. Well, if you go back to the main screen, at the top, there's a random roulette button, and if you press that, it's going to randomly select a recipe for you to use. I've played around with plenty of these before, and there's some that I find work better on your camera than others. So let's say that we've settled on color -400. Let's scroll down to the bottom of the page and just make sure that it's going to work on our camera. And in this case, we can see that it will. The way that we're going to use this page is just like a cooking recipe. We're going to go down the list and program in each setting into our camera in the menus. So the first item here is film simulation. So we're going to press menu, go into the image quality settings, and select film simulation. And let's find classic negative. Next, we've got dynamic range. So let's find that in the settings. It should be on the next page. And we're going to change that to DR400. So let's work our way down the list and dial in the settings. You'll notice that the way these recipes work is that not all of the settings are laid out in the same order as they are on the back of your camera. However, everything that you're looking for is going to be in that image quality settings page, so you're not going to have to search any farther outside of that. One of the trickier settings to dial in is going to be white balance. So let's find that in our menus, and we'll use the joystick to go right. And you see that we're left with a graph of all kinds of colors. So you're going to use your joystick to find the hue in the tint that matches up to the recipe, and make sure that you use the proper positive and negative values. You'll notice that one of the settings you won't be able to find in the settings is exposure compensation, and that's because it's actually on the top of your camera. Maybe you didn't know what that dial that has 0, 1, 2, -1, -2 is. Well, that's actually exposure compensation. And the way that this dial works is that it overrides the manual settings that you've dialed into your camera. So if you turn it to the positive values, it's slightly going to make your images brighter. And if you turn it to the negative values, it's going to make them darker. Okay, so now we've got everything dialed into our camera, and we're going to want to store it to the camera's memory for later. The reason we want to do this is just in case we change any of the settings, we can go back to the original film recipe that we've saved. Jumping back into the menus, you'll notice on the image quality settings tab that if you go to the third page, you'll notice that there's an option that says edit and save custom settings. So let's choose a slot to save this to. We'll do the first one, and we'll click Save Current Settings. So how are we going to know what this slot is? Well, let's rename it. Let's click on it again. We'll choose Custom Name, and let's call this one Color -400. That way there's going to be no confusion about what's programmed to each slot. So now we've got this stored into our settings, and we can come back to this film recipe at any point. You'll notice that there's 7 slots here, and we can store up to 7 custom film recipes in this section. So ideally, we're going to want to have this page as accessible as possible so that we can choose a film recipe very quickly. So there's a couple ways to do this, and I think the easiest way is to add it to your quick menu if it isn't already there. So let's go into the setup menu and hit Edit Dials. From here, we're going to choose Save Quick Menus, and then we're going to choose how many slots we want to have, and then make sure that at least one of your slots is programmed to custom settings. So find that Q button that's on the back of your camera. That's your quick menu button. When you press this, we should be able to see our custom settings that we just put in there, and you can actually cycle through and see the recipes that you have programmed on your camera. The nice thing is that you can see live what they're going to look like through the viewfinder. There's a couple recipes that I continue to come back to over and over. The first one being Kodak Portra 400 version 2. I really like the way that the colors are rendered right out of camera and the tones that it gives me. The second one being Acros Push Process, and it's a black and white film. It's very contrasty, and it's not how I usually shoot, but it helps me get out of my comfort zone and pay attention to composition rather than color. So you're probably stoked that you got these recipes dialed into your camera, but there's just a few more settings that I'd recommend you change before you go out shooting. One of the settings that you might want to change is to shoot in RAW and JPEG. Be aware that when importing these into the computer, you're probably going to see double the amount of images that you thought you'd be seeing. Half of these are the RAW photos and the other half of the JPEGs. The JPEG is great because that is the image that has your film recipe on it. Remember that the RAW images have more flexibility when editing, and they're going to be a higher resolution image. Something else I'd like to mention is that if you have noise reduction, I believe, turned on in your recipe, there's going to be a delay when you press the shutter, and your camera's going to say storing. And this isn't anything wrong that you've done, it just requires a little bit more processing on the camera's part. That's everything that I know about these film recipes, and hopefully they make your life more interesting and fun when you go out shooting. Thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I'd appreciate it if you could leave me a thumbs up below. I've got plenty of other videos on my channel of me shooting with my Fuji camera, and if those interest you, please check them out. And I hope you enjoy using your Fuji camera as much as I do.